I'm Nicholas Cabrera, Chairman of the Young Americans for Freedom at Mr. Jefferson's University. As we gather here today, let us be grateful for our freedoms. Most notably, in relation to tonight, our First Amendment right to the freedom of speech. The editorial board of the Cavalier Daily does not seem to understand this right. Though newspapers are a chief beneficiary of the First Amendment, they recently wrote an op-ed titled, "Dangerous Rhetoric is Not Entitled to a Platform." This is a common trend with the woke left. Any speech that they disagree with, they deem as dangerous and thus not protected under the First Amendment. However, for anyone on Cavalier Daily in attendance, I encourage you to grab a pocket Constitution on your way out of tonight's event. Despite attempts to deplatform tonight's guest, YAF at UVA persisted. When radical leftists defaced our pro-America message on Beta Bridge and vandalized our posters, we hung up twice as many as before. We persisted. Before I give thanks to our sponsors and welcome tonight's speaker with his proper introduction, I must read verbatim a university policy. I am Nicholas Cabrera, Chairman of the Young Americans for Freedom at UVA. Any attendees who wish to disrupt our invited speaker or hinder the ability of other attendees to see or hear our invited speaker should, per university officials, relocate to the Homer Flat on the lower lawn just outside of this building. Under University of Virginia policy, no person may disrupt a permitted speaker or hinder the ability of other attendees to hear or see a speaker. If you choose to disrupt our invited speaker or hinder the ability of other attendees to see or hear our invited speaker, the university officials in attendance will assess and remove a disruptive attendee in accordance with university policy when appropriate. I would now like to give a few thanks to tonight's sponsors and contributors. First and foremost, tonight's lecture is a part of Ken and Janice Schengold Advancing Freedom Lecture Series. Thank you both for your selfless contributions. And tonight's lecture would not be possible without the participation of the Jefferson Council. The Jefferson Council is a nonprofit organization comprised mostly of very committed UVA alumni that strive to preserve Mr. Jefferson's legacy, promote an open dialogue, reinvigorate the honor system, and preserve the appearance of the academic village of the University of Virginia. Young America's Foundation, thank you for the resources that you provide our chapters nationwide. The youth conservative movement is succeeding because of your guidance. And thank you to the University Police Department. And thank you to my dedicated executive board team. Tonight's guest is no stranger to the far-left woke mob. Mike Pence earned his bachelor's degree in history from Hanover College and attended Indiana University School of Law. After graduating, Pence practiced law and became the proud father to 3 children. In 2000, Pence entered the United States House of Representatives and was re-elected 6 times. Soon after, Pence became the 50th governor of Indiana, where he enacted the largest income tax in Indiana history, increased school funding, and expanded school choice. The former vice president's record of legislative and executive experience prompted President Donald J. Trump to select him as his running mate in July of 2016. The American people elected President Donald J. Trump and the vice president in the fall of 2016. And on January 20th of 2017, tonight's speaker became vice president. Now please, join me in welcoming the 48th Vice President of the United States of America, Mike Pence.
Well, hello, UVA. Or should I say, Wahoo-ah. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I want to thank you for the warm welcome. And it is my great honor to welcome you to the Ken and Janice Shengold Advancing Freedom Lecture Series, sponsored by Young America's Foundation, here on the grounds of the school founded by the author of the Declaration of Independence. Thank you all. And I want to thank Nick for that kind introduction, but he knows that the one I prefer is a little bit shorter. I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order, and it is my great honor to be on the campus of the University of Virginia tonight. You know, for more than 50 years, Young America's Foundation has been advancing the cause of freedom on campuses across the country, and it continues tonight. And I want to take just a moment to thank the UVA Young America's Foundation chapter. Many of the members are here tonight. They stood strong. They stood strong for the freedom of speech. They made tonight possible, and they do this generation credit. Will you join me in thanking UVA, YAF? You know, Benjamin Franklin said on departing from the Constitutional Convention, when he was asked what kind of government they created, he said, "A republic, if you can keep it." And conservatives know that we can keep our republic. And we will keep the torch of life and liberty burning bright for every generation to come. But we need this generation to be the freedom generation, starting right here at UVA. Well, first, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'll share some thoughts, and then I look forward to hearing what might be on your mind in the question and answer session that'll follow. First and foremost, it may surprise you, I grew up in a small town in southern Indiana. My family had a gas station business. I was what was called back then a gas station attendant, which some of the people my age in the room can explain to you young people what that actually was. But early in my life, I was drawn to public service. I was inspired by the example of President John F. Kennedy, the example of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. And I signed on to the Democratic Party. I was actually the Youth Democrat Party coordinator in Bartholomew County, Indiana in 1975. Kind of a community organizer, if the truth be told. But over my high school years, I began to study the Constitution. I went to a small college in southern Indiana, and I took a degree in American history with a special emphasis on the American founding, so much of which just generated out of this great and historic state. That was also at a time that I made the most important decision of my life. I put my faith in Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior, and my life has never been the same. At that time, my politics and my thinking about America actually began to shift. Much of that was impacted, candidly, by the voice and the inspiration of the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. You know, when I heard Reagan's optimistic vision for our country, a strong national defense, limited federal government, traditional values, it resonated with my heart. I signed up for the Reagan Revolution, and I've never looked back. Now, my career would take me into talk radio. I actually hosted a small-town talk radio show in Indiana for the better part of 10 years. It was kind of like Rush Limbaugh on decaf. But eventually I had the opportunity to run for and serve my hometown in the Congress of the United States. It was the dream of my life. And there I served in the Congress for 12 years, although it seemed longer. I went on to be the governor of the great state of Indiana, but you can imagine how humbling it was the day that I raised my right hand in January of 2017 and was sworn in as the 48th Vice President of the United States. And as I begin, let me just thank you. Thank you for the honor of serving as your Vice President. It was the greatest honor of my life. But on a personal level, to know the Pences is to know a family. I've been married to a school teacher for 36 years, and I'm still a work in progress. The highest title I'll ever hold is spelled D-A-D. Incredibly proud of our 3 kids. My daughter graduated from Yale Law School not too long ago, is practicing law. My other daughter, Charlotte Bond, is actually a writer for something called the Daily Wire. And my son is a captain in the United States Marine Corps who deployed last year in the service of the United States. The kids are all off the payroll. Happily married to some incredible people, and most importantly, our son and incredible daughter-in-law gave us our first grandchild just last year. So that's the Pences. Since I left office, I've had great privileges to travel around this country and spend time with the American people. But since early 2021, I've been traveling to campuses across America, talking about our conservative vision for this country, talking about our record and the challenges that our nation faces. I've been serving as the Ronald Reagan Presidential Scholar for the Young America's Foundation, and with the impact he had on my life, you can imagine how humbling that's been for me. You know, President Reagan really was one of a kind. I mean, while he's universally admired today, it may surprise you to know that wasn't always the case. Before he was the great communicator, Ronald Reagan was the great disruptor, a conservative outsider who vigorously opposed the moderates in his own party and the establishment of his day. Reagan's victory in 1980 breathed new life into our party. It changed the course of the nation and ultimately changed the course of the world. You know, sometimes I think today we find ourselves in a very similar position. President Donald Trump was also one of a kind. He too disrupted the status quo, challenged the establishment, and then, as now, there is no turning back. You know, under the Trump-Pence administration, we actually achieved things that conservatives had only talked about for generations. And we did it all not by backing down, by standing strong. And we did it all by standing strong for freedom. In 4 short years, in support of freedom, we rebuilt our military. We revived our economy, created 7 million good-paying jobs with less taxes, less regulation. We became a net exporter of energy for the first time in 70 years. We held China accountable for trade abuses and brought jobs back to the U.S. We reduced illegal immigration at our southern border by 90%. We crushed the ISIS caliphate, took down their leader without one American casualty, and in the face of the worst pandemic in 100 years, we launched the greatest mobilization since World War II, only in America. Closer to home, we appointed some 300 conservatives to our federal courts, including Justice Neil Gorsuch, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and Indiana's Justice Amy Coney Barrett. And for my part, I couldn't be more proud to have been vice president in the most pro-life administration in American history. In 48 months, our administration achieved the lowest unemployment, the highest household income, the most energy production, the largest trade deals, the most secure border, and the strongest military the world had ever known. But how times have changed. In 1 year, the Biden-Harris administration has unleashed a tidal wave of left-wing policies that threaten to wipe out all the progress that we made in 4 short years. Frankly, Democrats have moved so fast in the last 14 months, sometimes I feel like the The left hand doesn't know what the far left hand is doing. Actually, it's heartbreaking to see. I mean, we have the worst border crisis in American history, and it's about to get worse as the administration looks to repeal Title 42. Inflation is at a 40-year high, and a new high was set again today, the month of March, 8.5% inflation, hurting American families and American businesses. Violent criminals have been virtually free rein in some of our largest cities. Our hearts broke this morning with the headline of the terrible violence that took place on the subway of New York, and our prayers are with the injured and the victims and their families. You know, one of the advantages of being vice president is I get to drive my own car again. One of the disadvantages is I get to pay for my own gas. Tell you what, I was visiting my daughter and one of my unworthy son-in-laws just a couple weeks ago. You can take that one home. They're good. And I told him, the father-in-law thing. I told my son-in-law, I said, let me take the truck. I'll go fill it up. Wow. They live in California. Gasoline was like $6.50 a gallon. And folks, gasoline prices are up by 70%. Massive tax increases are on the horizon, and as I speak to all the bright young members of this rising generation, there's a mountain range of debt put squarely on your shoulders, and $30 trillion and rising. And following President Biden's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, it also seems around the world that our adversaries have been emboldened. After years of quiet, North Korea is firing missiles again. China seems to act in a more menacing way in the Taiwan Straits every single day. Iran threatens to restart its nuclear program. And in Europe, Russia launched an unconscionable war of aggression against the brave people of Ukraine. You know, Karen and I visited the Ukraine border just a few short weeks ago. And I will tell each and every one of you what we saw there. Throngs of women and children fleeing from the heartless and mindless violence being inflicted on the free people of Ukraine was something I never thought I'd live to see. President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people are inspiring the world, and we must continue to stand with them in defense of their freedom. You know, I met President Zelensky when I was your vice president. I knew he had a quality. But I must tell you, to see him taking the stand, the courageous stand at great personal risk that he's taken to lead his people, it's deeply inspiring. I've also met Vladimir Putin. I stood toe-to-toe with him, and I've told him things he didn't want to hear. And let me tell all of you, Putin only understands strength. And America must meet this moment with American strength. That means more military aid to the brave and courageous Ukrainian military. That means more economic sanctions on Putin and his regime. And let me also say, it means more humanitarian aid. And I would not miss the opportunity tonight to say to all of you and those that might be looking on across the country, if you have not yet made a contribution to one of the many relief organizations that are risking their lives to provide food and medicine and water to the people of Ukraine, do it now. Let's stand with them and make sure they have the ability to survive and fight for freedom. So it's a challenging time for families and our economy. It's a challenging time on the world stage. But here at home, one of the most troubling developments this past year has been the Biden administration's all-encompassing assault on culture and values. Under the Biden administration, wokeism is running amok in our public schools and universities. Patriotic education has been replaced by political indoctrination. They abolished our 1776 Commission and authorized the teaching of what's known as critical race theory in our public schools. Critical race theory actually teaches children as young as grade school to be ashamed of the color of their skin. But let me be clear. Critical race theory is nothing more than state-sanctioned racism, and it should be rejected by every state in every city in this country. And I don't have to tell conservatives on this or any other campus in America. In the midst of that assault has been an assault on free speech. Nick spoke about it just a few moments ago. I heard there was a little bit of controversy preceding my visit to the University of Virginia. But let me say, I'm incredibly proud. Incredibly proud to be standing in front of all of you, this conversation tonight. I'm incredibly proud of the team at UVA, Young America's Foundation. And let me also express my profound gratitude to President Ryan and the 17 faculty members who stepped forward and stood up in defense of freedom here at the University of Virginia. I mean, the antidote to cancel culture is freedom. The antidote to woke America is freedom. First Amendment of our Constitution reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition their government for redress. It's all here. This was fought for at the founding of this nation. It's crafted carefully by the genius, largely of Virginians. It's been defended by every generation ever since that's worn the uniform of the United States. And that's where we need to repair in these divided times. I mean, the founder of this university, Thomas Jefferson, wrote, and I quote, "As long as we may think as we will and speak as we think, the condition of man will proceed in improvement." Mr. Jefferson was right. As long as we may think as we will and speak as we think, the future will always be brighter. When he founded this great university, and I know tomorrow is Founders Day, he declared this institution will be based on the illimitable freedom of the human mind. And let me say to each and every one of you, your presence here tonight continues Mr. Jefferson's legacy from the founding of this university forward, and I'm grateful. I mean, freedom of speech is the God-given birthright of every American, and we can never let the woke left take it away. Thankfully, I'm proud to report that the American people have been stepping up for freedom, just like courageous voices did here and did on other university campuses where I've had the privilege to speak. And parents are beginning to take back our schools. I don't know if you noticed, but a Republican by the name of Glenn Youngkin was elected governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia just last year. And I was in Loudoun County a few days before that election. I'm telling you what, that election was about education freedom. It was about empowering parents. The people of Virginia can be proud. But it's not just happening in Virginia. I got to tell you, I was in San Francisco not long ago, just a couple days after the most liberal city in America literally recalled 3 school board members who cared more about renaming public schools than reopening public schools. Turned them out. The American people are stepping up. And the truth is, where many on the left have spent years agitating for a culture war, it looks like they got it. And it looks like they're losing. Because this generation, I believe, is a freedom generation. And the truth is, every one of you must be prepared to stand on the ramparts of freedom in your life. I spoke to a young man at a reception just before we came over, and he said, you know, there's this thing that I read over the weekend about students on campuses around the country tend to self-censor because they feel they don't want to speak out in class if they share a conservative worldview. He says, what do you suggest? And I said, speak up and smile. And that's what all of you need to do. And when you do it, I want you to know, young men and women, you're going to be standing proudly on the legacy of people like Jefferson and Madison. One who founded this university, helped found this nation, and another who is the father of our Constitution. You know, Ronald Reagan said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It is not passed along in the bloodstream. It must be taught to the next generation and advocated for and fought for. And I want to challenge you young people who are with us today, just prepare your minds for action. Prepare to be leaders in this freedom generation. You know, I lead an organization that just came up with a brand new agenda, working with some of the brightest conservative minds in the country. We called it a freedom agenda, and you can find it at our website, advancingamericanfreedom.com. But beyond those ideas, I just want to encourage you to wrap your minds and your hearts around the founding documents of this country. And the truth is, the Who's have a special connection to the Declaration of Independence. That means you have a special connection to one of the greatest documents in human history. That's your heritage, and it's yours to cherish and protect and uphold. And I think as you think about these challenging times and what we can come together on, I point you to that Constitution. The preamble of the Constitution reads like a mission statement for the American people. It's our to-do list bequeathed by the founding generation of this country. They created this government to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. As you reflect on those words, there are policies behind them. As we provide for the common defense, that means having a strong military, because peace comes through strength. It means it's having strong borders, because a nation without borders is not a nation. To establish justice, we must see to it that we are a nation that treats all our citizens equally. There can be no discrimination against any American for race or sex or religion, not in our criminal justice system, not in our hiring decisions, and not in college admissions. To ensure domestic tranquility, we need to support law enforcement at every level. We don't need to defund the police. We need to fund the police and give them the tools they need to defend our streets and our families. And to promote the general welfare, we need to embrace the principles of the free market economics that have created the most prosperous nation the world has ever known. But to secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity, you need to be prepared, as so many of you have already done, to defend the ideals in the Bill of Rights. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the freedom of assembly, and the right to keep and bear arms. Yours must be a generation that cherishes our history and our heritage. We need you to train yourselves up on what made this country special and unique. The truth is, this generation may be the last line of defense for the Constitution of the United States. You know, for most of our nation's history, both political parties were committed to the ideals enshrined in the Constitution. But that's no longer the case. We live in a time when many on the radical left routinely demean the American founding. And today, radical progressives seek to rewrite our Constitution and erode the liberties enshrined in our Bill of Rights. In fact, Democrats in Washington established a commission to consider packing the Supreme Court of the United States. And every day we see new efforts to silence or cancel those that dare to disagree with the progressive orthodoxy. So I say to each and every one of you in this rising generation, let the Constitution and the Declaration be your guide. You know, I hope many of you will step forward to serve our country in some capacity. Maybe some of you will put on the uniform of the United States, and it will be greatly to your credit. And some of you may step forward to serve in elective office at the local, state, or even the federal level. If you do so, you should know that every office holder takes the same oath of office to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Nothing more, nothing less. You'll be asked to take this obligation freely, without mental reservation or purpose of evasion. And you'll be called upon to well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office to which you're about to enter. You know, I recited that oath the last time, standing on the inaugural platform in January of 2017. I had the privilege of taking my oath of office on Ronald Reagan's Bible, and, as my kids insisted, on one of my own. Surrounded by family, I made a solemn promise to the American people and to someone else, because that oath ends with a prayer. So help me God. To those of you that will step forward and take that oath, whether it be in the uniform of the United States or in the service of this commonwealth or this great nation, let me challenge you to become men and women who will keep your oath. You know, there's a common misperception in your generation that adversity creates character. You know, I don't think adversity creates character. I mean, the way you all put it is, you know, if it doesn't kill me, it makes me stronger. Well, I think if it didn't kill you, it just didn't kill you. Adversity doesn't create character. Adversity reveals character. The truth is, when the hard times come, and you are tested, you will be the men and women that you have prepared your heart and mind to become in every quiet moment. before that day. For the sake of our nation and our future, we need you to be men and women who, as the Bible says, keep your oath even when it hurts. And I know you will. Because looking out at all the shining faces here today and the almost completely warm welcome I got walking across the grounds, I know you are the freedom generation. Just prepare yourselves. Do as the old book says, to grow in wisdom and stature and grace before God and grace before men. Become the kind of leaders upon which this nation will rely. And lastly, I would say to you, just remember the core of the American experiment. Is a timeless belief that we don't get our rights from sovereigns. We don't even get our rights from charters or governments. But as Mr. Jefferson wrote, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. So I say to all of you, with great respect, remember that the foundation of America is freedom, but the foundation of freedom is faith. And in this time in your life, I'd encourage you to do as it says in the book of Jeremiah. Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and you will find rest for your souls. You know, looking out at all of you here at UVA, I'm more convinced than ever this is a freedom generation. You're going to go from here and help lead your families, lead this Commonwealth, and lead this nation to even greater heights. And I'm absolutely convinced, as you rise to that challenge in your life and in the life of the nation, the best days for the greatest nation on earth are yet to come. Thank you all very much. God bless you. God bless America. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We will now begin our question and answer session. If you have a question, we ask that you form your question beforehand, have only one question with no follow-ups. You can form a single file line up this aisle to our colleagues at the top. With that said, we'll have our first question.
And if you could share with me your first name, you have me at a disadvantage. You know my name. And by the way, you can call me Mike. Don't worry about it.
Hello, Vice President Pence and everyone in attendance today. My name is Matthew Lawrence, and I'm a freshman here.
What's your name again, son?
Matthew Lawrence.
Hi, Matthew.
No matter what side of the aisle we lie on, one thing that everyone here has in common is that we all love UVA and that we care about it deeply.
Yeah.
UVA is steeped in traditions of excellence in every field. And my question revolves around how our tradition of excellence has recently been upended by the woke left. In recent years, UVA has emerged as an athletic powerhouse, winning a national championship in basketball, back-to-back national championships in lacrosse, and championships in women's swimming and diving. Recently, our tradition of excellence was broken, but not of our own volition. Emma Wyatt, a freshman and swimmer, the fastest swimmer in the nation, was robbed of a medal, beat by a man from the University of Pennsylvania. So my question to you, Mr. Vice President Pence, is what do you want to say to Emma and UVA as a whole about this embarrassing event that cheated our school out of a gold medal?
Well, Matthew, it's Matthew, right? Thank you so much for that thoughtful question. Emma Wyatt run that race. You know, I know that in his State of the Union address, President Biden promised to stand for the God-given right of men to compete in women's sports. But common sense needs to reign, and it will reign. And this is really about women's sports is a pathway toward achievement and excellence. And I expect there's some outstanding women athletes in the room today, and maybe some looking on. And we need to defend the integrity of women's sports in America for the benefit of women everywhere. And by the way, thanks for not rubbing that National Basketball Championship in this Hoosier's face. Yes, sir.
This is Jack from Liberty University. And my question for you today is that you mentioned...
What's your name?
Jack.
Jack?
Jack.
Hi, Jack. Could you speak up a little bit?
Yes. You speak a lot about you being Christian first, conservative second, and Republican third. And one of my friends actually told me a trick about how to get your attention. And that phrase is, I am the pastor. And I heard that you walk right up to him and say, how can I pray for you? So can you tell us a little bit about your journey of faith, and how does your faith inform you in public service? Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. What a lovely question. Well, for me, I was raised in a wonderful church family. You know, it was grace before dinner and church on Sunday morning. But I lost interest in high school in faith. Decided I could go on my own steam, but came up empty, felt hollow inside, and that was when I was a freshman in college. I made that personal decision to trust Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. The way that's manifested itself in my life and my marriage and my family and my kids is really hard to describe, because it's for me it's more of a relationship with God that just informs and strengthens and edifies all of what's most important in my life. You know, for me, I try to spend a little bit of time in the old book every morning. I try to spend a little bit of time in prayer, and invariably the rest of the day goes better when I do. So, you know, I've drawn a lot. I'm writing a book right now. I'm writing my autobiography, and almost everybody's excited about it. But as I'm writing the book, Jack, I actually can't write it without reflecting from time to time on lessons learned, some hard lessons that I've learned, but how my faith sustained me through all those days, and will sustain me still. But thank you for your ministry, and thank you for your nice question. Very kind.
Hi, my name is Rob.
Rob, hi Rob.
I'm a student here at the university, and I was just wondering if you're planning to run in 2024 for president.
I'll keep you posted. Thanks, Rob.
Good evening, Mr. Vice President, and thank you for coming. My name is Scott.
Hi, Scott.
You're studying mechanical engineering in your own area of expertise, history. I have a theory about why we're so divided, and I wanted to ask about how we can fix it. I think that we've lost what I call the presumption of good intent, which is we assume that the people we disagree with disagree honestly in how we pursue the good, and we instead presume malicious intent. and that poisons our interactions and our conversations. And so I think that we need to restore that presumption of good intent. Otherwise, I don't feel very optimistic about our future. And so I wanted to ask what you think elected officials, individuals with immediate influence, and everyday people like myself and my fellow students can do to restore that presumption.
I think that's a very eloquent comment. And let me say, I like to say I'm a conservative, but I'm not in a bad mood about it. Right? And when I served in the Congress of the United States, and by the way, I got to call him out because one of the people I most admire in public life, he was your governor, he was your senator. Governor George Allen is here with us today. Thank you so much. But the governor will probably back me up. I mean, one of the dirtiest secrets in Washington, D.C. is that people actually get along pretty well. Doesn't look like that on cable television, right? I mean, I remember back in the day, I used to do Crossfire back when that was a hot show in my first 10 years in the Congress. And then it got kicked off the air because it was too argumentative, and then every show became Crossfire, right? I mean, the truth is, I love to say when you get 10 miles outside of Washington, D.C., people in this country get along pretty well. We really do. We just got to have government as good as our people again. And I submit to you that for democracy to thrive, you have to apply heavy doses of civility. When I was in the Congress of the United States, I had many friends in the Democratic Party and liberals who we didn't agree on anything. I mean, anything, except the fact that I've concluded they were a well-intentioned American that were trying to do what they thought was best for the country, and they concluded the same thing of me. I write about this in my book, but one of my most meaningful relationships was with the late John Lewis. It's a civil rights hero. He was an aide to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. during the civil rights movement. He came to national prominence when he was beaten within an inch of his life at the Edmund Pettus Bridge on Bloody Sunday. But his courage inspired the nation to move forward on civil rights. But for me to be in Congress, to be serving with him, and to become his friend was one of the great privileges of my life. In fact, we were such good friends that back in 2010, he asked me to co-lead the annual pilgrimage to Selma, Alabama with him. And I told him, well, if I can bring Karen and Michael and Charlotte and Audrey, we're coming. Because I wanted my kids to see what the American people had accomplished, how we'd made progress toward a more perfect union. Now, John has passed on. History will remember him as a great leader in the civil rights movement. But I will also always think of him as a friend. We agreed on nothing. I mean, when we were on the floor and the debate was happening, John would come in with that sonorous, booming voice of his right after I'd given a speech, and he'd just wipe me out. But we'd walk back from the Capitol together and talk about our families, and he was also a profound man of faith. But that's what you're talking about, and you couldn't be more right. Democracy depends on heavy doses of civility. So as you stand for your values, do so with gentleness and respect. That's how we move our country forward.
President, God bless you and thank you for being here.
What's your first name?
Jonathan Hayden.
Hey, John, thanks.
Nice to meet you. My question is, if you were in our shoes, whether it's walking around grounds here or on any other college campus in the United States, what would be most important to you in today's world?
The first part of that question was a little muffled. Could you repeat the first part?
Yes, sir. If you were in our shoes in today's world, walking around campus here or anywhere across the United States, what would be most important to you?
Well, let me be honest and say I could have never gotten into University of Virginia. I mean, you people are incredible students. It's a little bit of what I just said, John. I mean, for me, at the time of my life when I had hair the same color as yours, I was ready to go. I wanted to get going. I wanted to start making things happen. And the better part of that time in my life was when I developed the qualities of the inner man. I mean, get your nose in those books. These professors really are some of the best in the country. I mean, put your head down, develop the character qualities. If faith is important to you, and I suspect it might be by your reaction, develop that faith. I mean, use this time in your life to prepare for what's next. You know, Abraham Lincoln, who grew up in Indiana. I mean, we like to say, you know, Lincoln made Illinois, but Indiana made Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln had a great saying that he learned on the little farm in southern Indiana. He said, if I had 8 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend 7 hours sharpening my axe. And I just say to you, this time in your life, sharpen your axe and become men and women of integrity and prepare for the future. And I promise you, you become men and women with the qualities that people trust and admire, then hang on to your hat. I can testify firsthand, you'll never know. You'll never know where it'll take you. Hello.
Hello, Mr. Vice President. Thank you for coming. I really appreciated you coming here and giving your speech.
Thank you.
My name is Jacob. I'm a third year at UVA.
Hi, Jacob.
I'm a political philosophy student. And in my classes, I've studied the kind of foundational theorists of individual rights and how their thoughts have influenced our founders and the political debates that have gone on in our government and our courts since then. And I'm curious, as a policymaker and as a lawyer, if there's any political thinker that has particularly influenced your own views. And also, if you'd be willing after
If there's anything what?
if you'd be willing after this, if it's possible, I'd love if you could sign my Joe Biden tank top.
Love to what? I didn't get it. But I'm very sorry, the PA's a little...
I'm curious if there's any political thinker, any political philosopher or thinker that has particularly influenced your views as a policymaker and lawyer.
I still didn't get it. I was like sorting that out.
I'm curious if there's a political thinker, some theorist of individual rights like John Locke, John Stuart Mill.
Oh, is there somebody I like?
Yeah, who's particularly...
Okay. I can tell you're a real smart guy. I'm very impressed. Yeah, you know, he doesn't get a lot of attention, but I had the privilege of meeting the late Dr. Russell Kirk. I will tell you, it was right when I was getting my career started. I was running a little policy group in Indiana, and I'd read a couple of his books. He writes a book when he's at Yale. No, not when he's at Yale, when William F. Buckley was at Yale, but he writes a book entitled The Conservative Mind back in the 50s. And it literally launched the conservative movement that exists today in America. He was a thoughtful intellectual, and I would say to anybody that is serious about understanding the conservative viewpoint on policy, is you should read The Conservative Mind. Also, a lesser-known book that he gave me a copy of is entitled The Politics of Prudence. Because Plato actually said that the singular quality of a public official in a free society is prudence. And so he spoke about that in the long sweep of history. So I had many other thinkers that have influenced me, but I had the privilege to meet him. We had breakfast at the Holiday Inn in Columbus, and his wife Annette is still with us, but he was a phenomenal thinker, and I think you'd greatly benefit. Russell Kirk. Okay? Good.
Ladies and gentlemen, this will be the last question of tonight.
Hi, thank you very much for speaking tonight. My name is Louis.
What is it? I'm sorry.
Louis?
Hi, Louis.
I'm just wondering, this is a bit of a hypothetical, but if...
Are you a Phi Gamma Delta?
My Pi Theta is the
I got it.
Society.
Okay. Don't know my Greek. It's all Greek to me.
I'm just wondering, if one of your children came out to you as gay, how would you respond? What would you tell them?
I'd look him in the eye and tell him I love you. And let me say on this issue, you know, if we got to know each other, you'd know the Pences, we love everybody. We treat everybody the way we want to be treated. But on this issue, and it's frankly something that when the Obergefell decision is made, which legalized same-sex marriage in America in the Supreme Court, Justice Kennedy wrote at the end that this decision will likely create an intersection and a tension between people in same-sex relationships and people in the exercise of their religious liberty. And we've been on this debate now for roughly 7 years in the country. And it's extremely important, I think, that we go back, as I said tonight, to first principles. And the first principles represent, you know, that the Congress shall make no law abridging the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. I mean, the way forward in this country, although, you know, I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. I believe in traditional marriage, and I believe marriage was ordained by God and instituted in the law. But we live in a pluralistic society, and the way we go forward, and the way we come together as a country united, I believe, is when we respect your right to believe and my right to believe what we believe. Well, UVA, thank you so very much. Young America's Foundation team here. I want to again say thank you to the administration here at UVA, to the faculty that's expressed strong support, and most of all, thank you to all of you for such a respectful and thoughtful hearing today on this great campus. Thank you all. God bless you.